Welcome back to Reconciliation Roundtable. I'm Mark Beckwith, and it is my passion to invite people of a religious persuasion to talk about their journey, where have been the opportunities, where have been the challenges, how we can offer the best of who we are to bring healing, hope, and reconciliation to our neighborhoods, communities, and indeed our country, which is torn apart and is threatened by deeper polarization. One of the abiding phrases that I use is to believe in hope. And hope is believing in spite of the evidence and then watching the evidence change. And what I've learned from the various people that I've talked to, from Shane Claiborne, Red Letter Christians, from David Blankenhorn, the founder and president of Braver Angels, from Rob Schenck, who used to be part of the Dietrich Bonhoeffer Institute, Angela Farrell Zabala, who leads Moms Demand Action, which works with Everytown for gun safety. What I've heard from all of them and what I feel in myself, although it's a struggle, as the temperature rises, as our adrenaline flows, as our outrage deepens, there's a temptation to be reactive. And I think what's most important is to recognize that those feelings need to be honored, yes. But what will move us forward is our ability to think and engage in hope. I'm hopeful to create an image of the mandorla. The mandorla is an Italian word for almond, which is the space that's created when two circles intersect. Initially, in religious art, it was the intersection between heaven and earth. Today, I think it's the intersection between red and blue, or believers and unbelievers. There is that almond space between those two circles. The two circles can never be fully separated, nor can they fully overlap. And it is in that space, which requires a level of risk, where we can learn more. It's a place where hearts are opened and minds are expanded and horizons are broadened. And a Reconciliation Roundtable is really an attempt to invite people into that space, and that the audience who hears these conversations may also be drawn into that space, which is not this or that, but it's a both and place. I've done a podcast with Wilkerson, who is very active in Braver Angels, as I am. And Wilk is a gun owner, staunch defender of the Second Amendment. And in both cases, when we talked about guns, we came to a deep understanding and appreciation for each other that we want to reduce gun violence. And we didn't agree on how to do that. But his passion and my passion was, let's keep talking. Let's keep talking, because when we keep talking, something may emerge. The tradition that I'm in, the Episcopal Church, which has its roots in the Anglican tradition, was created in the tension between Catholicism and Protestantism. And we've maintained that tension over these past 500 years. Sometimes we maintain it well and live into that tension. Other times we have gone to one side or the other. But my experience is, when you move into the tension and can identify it clearly, something can emerge. That's the faith that I carry. And I've learned that, and have learned from others. Rob Schenck, who was deeply involved in the anti-abortion movement, had been arrested lots of times, was a leader in Operation Rescue. And he, over the course of time, came to a different understanding. In the podcast, he said that at the National Cathedral on Christmas Eve, as he's walking up to take communion and walks by President Clinton, he says to the president in a voice that the Secret Service heard, "You are going to pay for what you've done." And of course, he's corralled by the Secret Service, and he has to justify himself. And he says, really, this is my position about abortion. And he has moved through that sort of rigid, rabid response to abortion to being able to be in conversation with people who have a different kind of viewpoint. And I just think that was just so important, that we have the opportunity to change, to grow, to listen, to have new perspectives. And each of the people that I've talked to have shared that experience that at one point in their work, in their ministry, they came up against something where either they didn't understand what was coming at them or completely appreciate what was coming up within them and worked through that. And I think there's always a possibility for us to do that, that's part of what the Spirit does. And we live in a culture increasingly where people are either this or that, up or down, black or white, and then things become transactional and it short circuits the opportunity to reflect at a deeper level. And I think Reconciliation Roundtable has been a process whereby inviting people to reflect at that deeper level and to invite others who are listening to do the same. Because if we just are in reactive mode or respond to the memes and the metaphors that come from the tribe that wants us to be a part of, that minimizes the opportunity to build relationships and to engage in reconciliation. I am a religious person and I'm passionate about the root of the word religion, which in Latin is religio, which refers to the symbols, stories, and practices that bind people together. Now, I will be among the first to say religion has done just the opposite. And we don't have to look very far to see how religion has used its platform and its power to keep people divided. And that saddens me. And deeper commitment, my deepest commitment is to raise up a religious process which can bring people together, can reconcile people one to another. What also saddens me is that more and more people only understand religion as a divisive entity. And they don't have to look very far. They on social media, in conversations with people, they hear sermons, they hear presentations that almost become tribal. And that pains me at the depth of my soul. And this podcast is really an attempt to express religion in this religio way, the practices, symbols, narratives that we have that bind people together, because I think that is what's so important and is not given the space, the platform, and the opportunity to be heard. Years ago, when I was a seminarian, first year seminarian, a friend of mine, a classmate, was struggling emotionally, and she made several suicidal gestures while she was a student. And the school decided to ask her to leave. And I was outraged. I'm thinking, this is a Christian community. We need to welcome and honor everyone and do whatever we can to help them through whatever crisis they might be in. And I remember going to talk to the dean about this, and my memory is that he was mumbling something back to me that made no sense to me, and my guess didn't make much sense to him. He was hoping that I would just leave the room and let it go. Well, I didn't let it go. I went and I sat down with Henry Nouwen, who was a professor there at Yale Divinity School in 1975 when I started there. And Henry Nouwen long since has left us, but wrote so many books and has been a spiritual mentor to literally millions of people. And I sat down with him and I told him this story, and I thought, he's going to hear me and he'd say, Mark, you figured this place out. You need to get out of here, you need to go to law school, need to do something else. Instead, he looked at me straight in the eye and he said, what do you expect? And part of me wanted to kill him because I said, I expect more than this. And he said, well, I don't know the particulars, but this is what people do. This is what people do. They hurt each other, sometimes intentionally, in this case, not intentionally. And I agreed with him on that. And sometimes the decisions they make are flawed. We need to move on from that and to engage in reconciliation. And each of the people that I've talked to in this reconciliation roundtable, many times we haven't agreed, but we are in support of doing what we can to understand each other, to build relationships, to live into hope. Another incident that I had when I was in my third year of seminary, I went through a real difficult time. My marriage was breaking up and I was breaking up. It was so difficult. And I went and sought out Henry Nouwen, and he said, "Oh, I've been thinking about you, and let's sit down and talk." So we did. And he just sort of said something that I will never forget. He said, "If you start to cry, let that be your prayer. If you fall asleep, let that be your prayer." Because I didn't have much energy. And when he gave me permission to think that my prayer could include sleep and tears, that was just enormously helpful. That so often I and so many of us, we set these expectations for ourselves that are far too high of what we're able to do in that moment. And Henry gave me permission to be myself, to live into my pain, to honor it and acknowledge it, and to make allowances for it. And I was just very grateful for that. I want to thank you for spending the time with me and my guests, for exploring how we can be agents of reconciliation at a time and a place and in a world where that seems to be beyond the pale, something that we're not able to do. I'm committed, as I think you are, to finding ways to build bridges across difference, to listen to a deeper level with one another, to claim our common humanity, even in the midst of conflict. I thank you for who you are, what you do, and may we all endeavor to become reconcilers in our families, in our neighborhoods, in our communities, and indeed in the world. Let me send you off with the words of Martin Luther King, which is a kind of benediction and blessing. Power without love is reckless and abusive. Love without power is sentimental and anemic. Power at its best is love implementing the demands of justice, and justice at its best is power correcting anything that stands against love. Thank you for listening to this episode of Reconciliation Roundtable. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform and visit markbeckwith.net to stay up to date with new episodes, blog content, and other news.